Hi, my name is Linda Bloom and I am the Chair and Founder of the Overcoming MS charity. We are now in our 10th year of empowering the MS community through healthy lifestyle choices, creating a world in which living a full and healthy life with MS is possible. In this special series, 10 Minutes with George, Living Well with MS host Jeff Alex speaks with Professor George Jelinek, founder of the Overcoming MS program. You'll hear about the origins of the evidence-based program, tips on changing your life for life, and about the future of overcoming MS. We really hope you enjoy the episode.
So, welcome to the first edition of 10 Minutes with George. And this is both the first edition of this type of podcast, if you like, this session of podcasts, and also the first time we're actually going to be going out on YouTube as well, so we have video as well. So, welcome George Jelinek.
Oh, thanks very much, Jeff. Pleasure to be here.
I think of anyone on our podcast, you probably need no introduction, but I will do a quick introduction. So George is the founder of Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis, and his research really contributed to the whole program, or not contributed, but founded the whole program, and is the author of the Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis series of books now, which hopefully everyone has digested, and it's very, very useful to get George back on the program to ask him questions from an expert point of view. So I wanted to start off, but the idea is we're just going to do a quick 10-minute questions, and there's a series, so we're going to come back to some more questions later on. But to start off with, so if someone's just found the Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis program, what would you say are some of the simplest ways that they can best understand what's involved in the program?
Well, I think these days we've got such a range of resources that people can tap into, and there's, I guess you could sort of think of them as entry-level resources and then more sophisticated or more complex things. But I personally think the website's a great place to start, because the information there is reasonably generic. It's presented to a sort of wide audience, doesn't presuppose any particular background or science or anything like that. I think following on from that, the OMS book is obviously a must read, and that kind of gives you the credibility and the science behind the whole program. So this isn't something clearly that has just occurred to me in the middle of the night or anything like that. It's taken quite a bit of work and a fair bit of time and the right sort of background to understand the science to really put it together. What I would have said in the old days, probably while we were still doing face-to-face retreats, was that the real sort of icing on the cake is going to a retreat. But I know OMS are now moving towards doing some virtual retreats online, essentially a retreat. I don't think they're calling them that, but I know there's something in October 2022, the Pathway to Overcoming MS. I think those are a much more immersive kind of experience. But I guess the prerequisite really is to come into the whole thing with an open mind and a questioning and curious sort of attitude about what you can do for yourself to help yourself improve and hopefully get better after this diagnosis.
I certainly, when I started it was the second edition of the Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis book, or actually the first edition with it being called that, but essentially second edition of the book. And I'm really into the science of it. But I would say the handbook as well is pretty useful, because that's less, maybe someone who's not so interested in all the science, but, and then they can go into the Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis book and see all the actual references. I mean, there are countless pages of references. It was all backed up by science. But the handbook is maybe quite an easier way to get into it, maybe.
Yeah, look, I think you can do them in whichever order you prefer, really, the OMS book or the handbook first. But um, I think you're right that the handbook, we haven't really used a lot of scientific reference behind it. It's a sort of combination, really, of people's lived experience of the program and of the illness, but also very reliant on the sort of foundations of that incredible science. The thing, I guess, that sets the handbook apart for me, that makes it something really worthwhile for people early in the illness, the personal stories. Um, because I think that's that sort of key ingredient of hope that people are often looking for early on when they're being barraged by all the negative images of what their future might look like. And sadly, a lot of that is everywhere through the scientific literature, through healthcare, and to sort of look at that differently and find that little bit of hope. I think a lot of that is much more based on hearing other people's stories than it is on the science, at least initially. When you first get a glimpse that it's possible not only to not deteriorate, but actually to live a sort of healthier life than you were living and to be well. That's a sort of real light bulb moment for most people, I think.
When people adopt the program, some people are very keen to go all in. So personally, I just completely did everything straight away, and then other people will gradually adopt the program. And do you think there's pros and cons to different approaches, or whether you need to go 100%, or could you slowly change your lifestyle?
Well, Jeff, the thing I've realised over the years is that everyone's very different, obviously, and different approaches to different people. You, like me, soon as I became aware of the research, particularly Swank's research, soon as I read that paper, my diet changed instantly. I mean, I simply couldn't look at food that I knew was going to make me unwell, given that I was looking at anything I could do to try and improve my situation. And of course, that rapidly led to finding all the other things that had become the OMS program. And it was such a simple decision for me. It wasn't even a decision. It was simply, as soon as I became aware there was another thing I could do, like get a bit more sun, keep my vitamin D level up, do more exercise and so on, I immediately started doing it. And of course, that's very reflective of my personality, and I'm sure it's reflective of yours in the way you approached it. But I know a lot of people find that very daunting. And of course, the whole basis of OMS isn't to tell people what to do. We've never sought to give rigid guidelines for people or anything like that. This is all about providing choices for people, choices that, if they're able to look at the range of what's on offer and choose what's most appropriate for them. For some people, that's all of the program. For some people, there'll be parts that don't feel appropriate for them. Then they've got the best chance of being well. And I mean, the pace at which they do that's another thing. I mean, I find it hard to understand why you wouldn't do it really quickly when you know that there's damage going on. But of course, some people find habits much harder to break than other people do. And a lot of those things are simply bad habits that have evolved over the course of one's life, and breaking them can be really hard for some people.
And in terms of specific parts of the program, could you clarify a bit about the mindfulness and meditation parts? So do different mindfulness practices count towards that element of the program? I mean, some people, it could be that they have a mindful practice which involves cold water swimming or walking, or they can be doing yoga retreats, or they could be doing recorded meditation sessions. Do all of those count, or is there specific mindfulness practices that are more beneficial?
No, they all count. And this is such a big area. It's sort of almost a whole area that's deserving of a sort of volume in its own right, because there is so much to mindfulness and meditation in general that isn't just about stress reduction. I mean, stress reduction is what drove the whole thing initially, because of that very clear link between stress and worsening of the illness that is now well established in the medical literature. But there's so much more to mindfulness than just stress reduction, and so much more to other meditative practices like yoga and Tai Chi and so on. Quite apart from the health benefits, there are enormous benefits to one's whole life in terms of the sort of insight aspect that comes with meditation practice, the sort of improvement in one's inner landscape and emotional life that comes along with that development and learning of the skill of kind of tolerating difficult thoughts and situations. You could really run several workshops on this and just scratch the surface, but I would encourage anyone looking into that aspect of the program to do whatever it is that they find that most suits them. And of course, the aim in mindfulness in general isn't just the 30 minutes in the chair every day. It's taking that mindful approach out to life, so that some people actually find they are very mindful without doing the meditation on a daily basis, and they recalibrate their lives, pay more attention, get more involved in what they're seeing and experiencing and feeling. And that, of course, is the aim of the whole thing. Quite apart from that stress reduction, the more general aim in terms of improving one's life. So it may not completely answer your question, but I'm very open to all those different approaches. And sometimes, I regularly meditate, quite frequently, twice a day, mostly once a day. And it's made an enormous difference to my life. But equally, I've done quite a bit of yoga at different times. I get an enormous amount out of composing, playing, recording music, listening to music. There's a whole range of activities that induce that same kind of inner state.
And on another aspect, the OMS diet, would you say that there's elements of the OMS diet which should be prioritised more over others? So if someone were to gradually adopt the programme, are there elements of that which you would say should be prioritised?
Yeah, look, I think the sort of key to it is the plant-based aspect. In terms of overall health, avoiding animal products, plus or minus seafood. People have that as an option they can take, which broadens a whole range of possibilities. But to make the basis of the diet built around plants, I think is the real key, because that almost implies the whole food part of it as well. Once you're on essentially a plant-based diet, then it's still possible to eat a lot of junk if you really try. But for people who are preparing their own food, it's very hard to prepare plants in a way that is really unhealthy. With a bit of effort, you can do it. But,
I think in supermarkets in the UK now, there's a lot of because there's a lot more veganism now. So there's a big amount of heavily processed vegan food that is probably you could quite easily become an unhealthy vegan nowadays, I think.
Buying off the shelf, buying processed food and buying things with a list of ingredients 15, 20, 30 items long, it's sort of getting out of the realm of food, really, and I start not to see that as food. That's sort of more a chemistry experiment, really, and we're the guinea pigs.
And finally, why do you think that some people do better on overcoming MS than others? I mean, there's certainly we've had talks to people running marathons, climbing mountains, doing extraordinary things, and then other people who are fully compliant with overcoming MS do end up maybe in a wheelchair or certainly with mobility issues. So there's a real array of people who are all following overcoming MS, but have quite different results.
Look, that is a really critical question, I think, and a lot of research effort needs to go into that. I mean, we're probably a little way down the track yet, a little early to get to that question in terms of the research that I've been involved with. We've published an awful lot which strongly supports the better outcomes associated with the key planks of the OMS program. But further down the track, once it's more broadly accepted, I think more research teams will start investigating this space. And I think there are going to be things that we come up with. For instance, people's genetic makeup. We're really talking about, and this is possibly getting a bit complex, but the OMS program is really about epigenetics. It's about the way lifestyle influences your genetic expression, but you're still dealing with the basic DNA that is essentially not almost immutable through your life. And so I suspect we're going to find, just as we do with many medical, standard pharmaceutical or surgical treatments, that some people respond well and some people respond not so well, and that there's often a genetic basis. So pharmacogenetics is a sort of emerging field where they can start to perhaps screen people to predict who's going to do well on a particular drug and who isn't. And I think we may find that something like that applies to OMS, because of course it's a great concern to people when they're really adherent and rigorously following a program like this, if they find they're not improving and they're starting to deteriorate.
Okay, that is the final question for this episode. So I thank you very much for joining us on the first edition of 10 Minutes with George.
Pleasure. Thanks, Jim.